Sahana Mehta, who is going to present on Anekāntavāda and Repair in society, in societies, excuse me. So, Sahana.
Thank you so much. Hi, everybody. It's great to be with you all today. I'm Sahana Mehta, and I'm excited to talk with you all a bit about Anekantavāda and repair in societies. And I'm also going to share my screen. There we go. Okay. Hopefully you're all able to see that. This was the talk description for today, just to refresh folks. Really, I will be speaking about repair in societies and particularly from the vantage point of American history and the legacies of slavery and its harms. And so I will be diving in from that point today. And like I said, my name is Sahana. I'm based in New York City, and I'm the director of donor organizing or development and fundraising at an organization called Liberation Ventures, which I'll share a little bit more about later on in the presentation. And I've also spent some of my career in organizing within South Asian communities around various social issues as well, whether that be gender, caste, and other issues. Today, I'll go over a little bit of introduction and frameworks for us. I want to talk a bit about America at 250 and how Anekantavāda applies to our current context, the stakes we're up against, how we move towards repair in practice, and finally, how we pursue Anekantavāda as an engaged practice, as this conference talks about. So just to begin, I wanted to orient towards three key terms. I think they've already come up plenty of times within the conference thus far, but just to refresh, Ekantvat, the singular point of view. Ekantvat does not admit the validity of the opinions of others. It does not have the patience to accept the arguments and views of others, and in other words, this is a form of intolerance. Syadvad is the philosophy of seeing an individual or an object from various points of view, trying to understand them, and thus acquiring right knowledge of those things. And finally, Anekantvad Syadvad is full justice done to the views of others. And if you're wondering where I got the information, thanks to my Nana who's on the call, who provided me these books that he's had for a very long time and his very own Spark Notes for me. So these are three of the topics that I'll talk about a little bit. And here's one of the quotes from the books that Nana provided. This is by Komal Chand Sodhya, and Mahavir says, at the social and national level, insistence on imposing such individual and part truths leads to social unrest and violence, resulting in unimaginable destruction of life, property, and environment. World history is replete with such chaos, and the trend, unfortunately, continues unabated, the reason being non-appreciation of the principle of non-absolutism, and hence non-accommodation of others' points of view, insistence on one's own belief that it is the whole truth. And Mahavir was aware of the precise reason for this human weakness. It is our ego which drives us to this conclusion and behavior accordingly. So really, what we're talking about today is also bound up with ego, and so I'll focus on that as well. So going to the topic of America at 250 and my argument that we're currently in an age of Ekantvad, or the singular point of view, an intolerant point of view. This is an image from just less than 24 hours ago. This is an image from last night at the White House Correspondents' Dinner. That is a room that symbolizes pluralism, the press, and the idea that society should be able to hold multiple perspectives. And this is the Secret Service, protecting the room from the individual with a gun. And I think that that just perfectly exemplifies the moment that we're in. We're in a moment where swaths of society are vilifying immigrants, Black people, poor people, trans people. And we see that type of bias and discrimination going on unchecked. And we also see in parts of the progressive left, which I find myself that which I am a part of, we pursue cancel culture or purity politics, where we only hold selective points of view as valid and dismiss the rest. We are in a moment of a needless war that will affect our world for generations and years to come. And overall, if we continue down this path driven by ego, destruction and violence will flourish in our society, as the quote before suggested. And to share another example of this moment of Anekantavāda, I want to share this video. I'll share about a minute of this clip, and I just want to provide advisory warning that this video contains some aggression by the police, so it's totally up to you whether you want to look away from your screen. But the other day, my high school classmate featured on the screen here, Chiose, who is a city council member in Brooklyn, protested nonviolently outside of the home of one of his constituents who was facing deed theft. Deed theft is a predatory practice that bars Black people from building generational wealth and stability through home ownership. And the cops threw him violently to the ground despite his compliance, and now he has a concussion. And so I'll just show a clip of the video to give some of that context and return to the talk.
This is
Is the volume okay?
Democracy Now!, democracynow.org, The War and Peace Report. I'm Amy Goodman with Juan Gonzalez. 4 people were arrested Wednesday in the Bed-Stuy neighborhood in Brooklyn after gathering in support of Carmela Charrington, a resident fighting eviction from her longtime family home. Supporters gathered in front of a brownstone on Jefferson Avenue as marshals arrived to carry out the eviction. When they couldn't get through, police were called. Brooklyn council member Chiose was among those police arrested. He was wrestled to the ground and handcuffed as protesters chanted, "Who do you serve? Who do you protect?" Homeowner Carmela Charrington and local housing advocates say the sale of her property to investors in 2024 was a form of deed theft, a criminal practice where predatory speculators use forgery, deceit, or fraud to illegally transfer ownership on paper and sell properties without the knowledge or full understanding of rightful owners. Bedford-Stuyvesant is a rapidly gentrifying, historically Black neighborhood where elderly homeowners are often targeted by speculators.
I'm going to pause the clip there, and I'll provide the link in case anybody wants to watch the rest of the segment. But as you can imagine, it was deeply disturbing and upsetting to watch my former classmate, who I've known since I was 12 years old, be shoved to the ground by cops in such a violent way. And seeing this clip the other day as it came out just forced me to ask the question, what if they had chosen to see his perspective, to treat him and his constituent with humanity and compassion? And at the same time, Anekāntavāda requires me to look at the cops' perspective too. They've been trained in a culture of violence that promises security but often cannot deliver because violence rarely shifts behaviors for the better. It is not the individual cop's fault alone, it is also the system and the culture of violence, or of Anekāntavāda, that they are steeped within that leads to moments like this one. So how do we move forward from this moment? How do we move out of an age of Anekāntavāda and towards one of Anekāntavāda? This is the repair framework. This is a framework that my organization, Liberation Ventures, uses to think about how we repair harm in our society. And so there are 4 steps: reckoning or understanding the what, how, the who, the why of what has contributed to the harm; acknowledgement, admission the harm has been done; accountability, ownership and commitment to non-repetition; and redress, acts of restitution, financial compensation, other forms of rehabilitation that are taken to heal the wound. And seeing this, over the last year of working at Liberation Ventures, thinking about this day in and day out, has just reminded me this is the Jain mission. This is deeply aligned with our values of ahimsa, or do no harm, of repair, of what we practice when we say Michami Dukram to one another and we seek forgiveness and try to make repair in our relationships. And at Liberation Ventures, we do this work by resourcing the movement for reparations for slavery and its legacies. And so, what do I mean when I say a culture of repair? In the simplest terms, a culture of repair is a culture where anytime harm is caused, individuals and institutions have the skill and the will to repair it. That is the basic skill that we are trying to teach across America and that we are trying to foster in our communities. And so what does this have to do with Jainism? Going back to Jainism, I mentioned Michami Dukram earlier. Thank you to, I heard other people talking about AI earlier in the presentation. I have to admit, I used Jain GPT, if anybody has tinkered with Jain GPT before, to find this definition in particular. But I never knew before that Michami Dukram actually breaks down to these larger concepts. So the first step is humility of the body and mind. The second step is cutting off the fault that was committed and your desire to repeat it. The third is resolve to keep to your moral code. Next is self-criticism or reflection. Then confession or acknowledgement of the sin or the wrongdoing. And the final is pacifying the mind and calming your remorse. And I also think about that as moving through guilt and shame. And so this is just within our tradition, repair is embedded. And some other examples also from Jain GPT include pratikaman, openly acknowledging one's faults and seeking forgiveness to restore trust. Bajushan, we ask and grant forgiveness, as I said before. This one I didn't know about, but mutual confession of faults in the Sangha. So, where community members come together and share their mistakes and pardon one another to foster harmony in the community. And various others, including, of course, ahimsa, as well as charitable deeds and service. So, we see time and time again the ways in which repair as an active practice and engaged Anekantavāda are part of our responsibilities as Jains. And I wanted to give an example of repair in practice to illuminate this for us. So this is this on the left-hand side, you'll see a picture of Palm Springs, Section 14. So in the 1950s and 60s, there was a black and brown neighborhood called Section 14, and it was where many workers who built the Palm Springs resort town that we know today lived. And they were relegated there by the city and by others in the community who said, here's your small plot of land. But over the years, that community started to build there, and they built their homes, their lives, and their communities, and were starting to the process of building generational wealth. Well, in the 60s, the city of Palm Springs decided to raze and destroy the entire community with the homes and all their possessions within them. And so on the right-hand side, you'll see Miss Pearl Devers, one of the survivors of this violent act by the city of Palm Springs, standing on the land where her home used to be. And now the survivors of this, including Miss Devers, are in their 80s and 90s and have been pursuing organizing in order to get repair from the city of Palm Springs. And they were able to win that fight, and they got a $27 million settlement with the support of Liberation Ventures, my organization, in order to create repair in their community and to address the damage that had been done, not only to the houses themselves, but also to their ability to gain generational wealth and build success that would last generations in their own communities. And I think that this win really happened because the survivors and the organizers were successful in inviting the city to see their perspective, and the city was open enough to listen and make amends for this harm. In other words, they were all able to see other perspectives beyond their own. And I'll send more information out about this instance in case you want to learn about it. And overall, I think as we look towards what's next, as we look towards the future of America at this point of our 250th, Anekantavāda requires us to look at American history and oppression and confront them through repair. So I want to invite all of us to consider one place in your life where your perspective was limited or where you were just touching one piece of the elephant, and seek out understanding, find another, and take one action towards repair. And before I close, and I love this picture on the left of the elephant metaphor, which I'm sure has come up a lot this week. Before I close, I just wanted to share a few opportunities. I'll share a link in the chat that includes all the details for these, but I invite anybody to engage with and support Liberation Ventures to build a culture of repair this 250th and beyond. I invite folks to learn the fuller story of South Asian American history with the South Asian American Digital Archive, including some of the amazing Jain stories that are on the archives. And I invite folks to support organizations that are repairing harm within our communities. And one example of that is South Asian SOAR's National Member Network. And these are organizations fighting against domestic violence and other forms of violence in our communities. Thank you all for your time.